the immigrants I work with too, I try to get them to see their own beauty, their own meaning, their own courage especially. That's one of the most important things, I think, is to access a person's courage. To be able to know, you're going through a really tough time here, but you're standing tall, you're standing on your own 2 feet and you're trying to make this better. That's a testament to your courage.
Welcome to Just Healing, where we rediscover humanity in our conversations around trauma and celebrate all the unique ways we love and heal. Hey everybody, welcome to this next episode of Just Healing, and we are in for a treat. I like to talk about things that are a little bit pushing the envelope, and we have an amazing person to talk about this. And so I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Christopher Deulen, and he's going to tell you all about his fabulous self. Dr. Deulen?
Hi, Dr. Debra. Good to be here. So I have a master's degree in theology and a PhD in clinical psychology from Fuller Theological Seminary. And I have most of my career working with immigrants and trying to understand their cultural perspective on things, their religious perspective on things, their psychological perspective on things. And so it's been my passion in my career to really work with the culturally diverse.
Right. And you, not just immigrants. You work with transgenders, you're bilingual, you do all the whole gamut, and right now, thinking about everything that's happening in our US and all that, you have probably got a lot to say, about that.
Yeah, it's kind of what's really a scary time, especially for immigrants. And
yeah.
I'm feeling that anxiety so much from my patients, and not just them as well, people that aren't immigrants, that they're feeling for oftentimes the immigrants and what, refugees and what they're going through. And I think that what's going on is kind of the net's dropping out for them. They feel like, the United States isn't necessarily going to be fair anymore and going to be leaving them high and dry. Like the deck is stacked against them at times.
Right. A friend of mine was in Costco, and over the loudspeaker, it said, if, you're illegally here, we will come for you. There was this announcement.
Oh my God.
And she called me. She was scared. She has her green card, everything. She's here legally. But she was just panicked, total breathing and all this. And I'm like, imagine someone who's not, right? But imagine someone who knows someone, or, and
Exactly.
I just can't. Imagine you don't speak the language and that's all you hear,
Bingo.
Right? The anxiety that's there. It's
the fear.
Yeah.
The fear is palpable.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually. Yeah.
Yes. And you can't cut it with a knife because the anxiety. Someone once told me about how they woke up every day and just the fear of driving scares them because they're afraid to get pulled over, right?
Exactly.
And every day you have that. And with trauma, the cortisol, all of that releases. What does that do to someone's body?
Well, and it's worse with if people, for instance, are facing deportation and they have a history of trauma, it makes it very difficult to treat PTSD because the feared object is still out there. It still can happen. And in fact, that's what oftentimes activates their trauma. And it's very difficult at times to treat because of that.
Right. You're always in an active stage. You're always sketching. You're always doing this. And then if you have other issues like substance abuse on top of it because you're trying to cope, what do you pick first?
Exactly. And also a lot of people, that's the reason why they get into federal detention because of those kinds of problems, because of substance abuse problems, which may be related to trauma as well.
Right.
And so, that's the part that's really challenging for me to be able to meet with people like that. I think it is healing to some extent, though, that when we have people out there like you and I that are trying to really make a difference and trying to be able to help, them with their trauma or other issues that may be going on, then that really can still give them some kind of hope, even in this kind of atmosphere that what's going on in the United States right now.
Oh yeah.
Which again, I have people that aren't even immigrants that are considering moving out of the country. They're going to Mexico or other places as
Canada
well.
or wherever. It's
Yeah,
crossed my mind because maybe they'll close the borders and won't want us. I mean, we're kind
exactly.
of like, people don't want Americans right now. It's really
Yeah,
scary.
yeah, very much so. And that's why I try to be able to relate to them. And being bilingual is really incredible and important for me to be able to do. I thank that so much. I actually started becoming bilingual because I fell in love with a Bolivian girl in high school. And that actually led me to trade French for Spanish. And it's been invaluable for me to be able to do that. People really, truly appreciate being able to be talked to in their own language. And that's been my vast majority of clientele throughout my entire career.
Yeah. It's the Spanish speaking population, right? And, I've been in federal detention centers. I've been, I've seen all that. And the media right now portrays it in such a negative way. And there are some really good people in there, right? And I struggle with trying to tell people that because they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it is not what you think, you know?
Yeah, the picture is not. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that we have in this country is that people go to extremes. I'm kind of a dead in the middle moderate in terms of looking at how things go, because too often the extremes go either direction, too liberal, too conservative, that sort of thing. And that's why people are at war a lot. I think that we really have to come back to more of a moderate position at looking at all these issues, including immigration.
Right. Look at every single piece that's in there, right?
Hmm.
People, you have people in the gay and lesbian transgender community
Hmm.
that feel targeted. I mean, like to feel like they're not even a person, right? Because they
Bingo.
can't even use they can't even use the pronouns that they want, right? Now
Exactly.
imagine compounding that
Right.
with
Exactly.
everything, you know?
I have I have two grandchildren that are transgender right now, so I'm having to actually do my own make sure my vocabulary is going correctly as well to not be offensive to them whatsoever. Right?
Right. Right. To use the
Yeah.
and or whatever they choose, right?
Right.
And it's interesting because my my son declared his gender attraction to me one day, and I'm like, okay, you like girls. Like I've never even thought about it. Like if he would have said boys, I would have had the same response, right? If he would have said whatever, and I was just like, that is so cute that my son could express himself in that way, where it was when I was being brought up, it was no, this is what it is. This is what you're going to be attracted to, or whatever. Where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad you've chosen.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly. And I think that that's exactly what we have to start to do. We have to start to try to understand people instead of, you have to have a cultural love for culture. You have to have a love for different people, and that diversity can make all the difference in the world. I think that's what the world does need. We need to be able to not just tolerate people, we need to celebrate them as well, where they are in their differences. I mean, I just love cultural diversity, and that's why, I do what I do, and that I see mainly immigrants in my practice.
Yeah, and you've done some research in this area too, right?
Not research exactly. We were keeping some things back in the 80s with the Cuban refugees that came over, the Marielitos that came over. Yeah, we actually developed an animal assisted program for the Marielitos because the Mariel Cubans had a really bad reputation back in the 80s. That was the movie Scarface was based on, right?
Mm.
So we were dealing with a lot of those people, and traditional methods for dealing with therapy weren't working. And one day we actually discovered something with a very psychotic patient. He was Russian, he spoke Spanish, he spoke English, but he got very psychotic and he started being delusional with the other detainees or the other Cubans, and they wanted to beat him up. So we took him next door to the boss's place where he had chickens, and this guy started to raise these chickens. He started to help them, and then within 4 hours, his psychosis completely covered up. It completely cleared up. And at that point, my boss, Enrique Jurado, said, maybe we're onto something here. And so they started getting chickens, geese, horses, cows. They even got a llama. They had emus. And it was just incredible to be able to see these people thrive in that kind of an environment. Because they'd been raised in the rural parts of Cuba.
Sometimes you just need something different. You just need to go about it differently, right? I was just recently consulting with someone, and they were from a communal descent, background, like what you're talking about, right? And they were like, this person won't talk to me. I said, well, maybe it's how you're approaching them. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, you keep coming at all of these things I need to change, saying, I see this. Have you ever thought of just saying, how was that experience for you? Do you have questions about what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think in those kinds of situations, we have to become more of the learner than the teacher. There are times when we have to understand where they're coming from culturally. And when you do that, you can get in there. One of the greatest compliments I think I ever received from people is when they forget that I'm a white man. They'll be in the middle of speaking Spanish. We'll be talking in Spanish, and they'll be talking about those gringos. And I say, they go, no offense. I go, none taken.
Not taken.
Right? I'm considered to be a gringtino, half white, half gringo, half Latino. So when you can get in there, when you can understand them and be a learner, I think is the most important thing first, before you can try to help them.
Right. And you have to take it from their perspective, right? And that's the beauty. Like you deal with all these immigrants, you deal with all these people, and sometimes people who need asylum, right? What is one of the things that you do first to get them to sit and be comfortable with you, to break down some of that resistance and anxiety?
Well, first of all, especially if they're Latinos, it's much easier because I am bilingual and I am able to speak in their own language, and that makes them, I don't have to use a translator in those cases. In other cases, we have to use translators. It's a little bit more difficult. But I think the first thing I do is really try to empathize with them and say to them, yeah, this must be really difficult for you. You're going through this. I understand that. And oftentimes they're surprised that somebody, especially white, is going to think that's, they're going to help them in that. So when you let them know you care, and I like that saying, I think it goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when they start to know how much you care, then they oftentimes, those barriers start to drop. Mm-hmm. And then they start to really open up. And I learned different things, like, for instance, one of the best things I do before most of my clients go is I touch my heart. And they touch their heart. And I think that's really, really, that you make that connection, that human connection is the most important thing. Not the techniques we use, not the theories that we follow. It's really that one-to-one connection with people.
It is. It's that one-to-one connection. I remember when we used to work, together, and every morning I would get a Chris Deulen hug, and I would look for my hug. I'm like, I hope he doesn't think I'm weird, but you always give the best hugs. Like, it was like,
I just think that human contact is so important. When you let people know that, and they know that you through your own expression on your face that you feel their pain in some ways, then they are willing to then open up much more. And that includes people that have severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia. Oftentimes, I don't try to argue with their psychosis. No. I try to get into their world and understand them, and then find that kernel of truth to help build on with them too.
Right. I remember I forgot who she was or whatever, but she spoke French and she just wouldn't stop crying. It was like early on, when we were together. And you just said so subtly, like it was so subtle. We were standing there and all the officers are there and they're just like, what do we do? She wants that. You're like, have you thought of joining her in it? That was it. Like, just join her in her sadness. Yeah. Like, yeah. Have you thought what that's like? Like,
exactly. Exactly. Because people, like I said, when you make that kind of connection, and they can see, we can't solve all their problems, but we can at least be human with them.
Right.
I just really feel like we're losing our humanity in society so much. It's so painful to see. And so I do what I can do to try to make that connection. And sometimes it makes a big difference. Sometimes just that little thing, like when I get people sometimes to exercise that have trauma and bring that trauma up while they're exercising. And then I give them a mantra. I say something like this: when that trauma comes up, say this to yourself: I am no longer a victim. I am a courageous survivor. And that makes all the difference sometimes for them. And now, next time I see them, so who are you? I am no longer a victim. I'm a courageous survivor. And some of those are the best methods to be able to help people with that.
Totally. I can even see someone on a Stairmaster doing that, right? I
Absolutely.
am no longer a victim. I'm a courageous survivor. It's like, it is so poignant because a lot of people don't realize just changing your wording, right, on things changes your mindset and you move forward with things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And one of the things, I don't know how you felt about this, but when they got rid of DEI, I was gutted. Like I was gutted on so many levels. I mean, how was that?
Absolutely. Well, it's throwing us back into ignorance again.
Yeah.
It's throwing us back into times where, ignorant populations are easy to control. Educated populations are more difficult to control. And so I think that there's, people want an ignorant society. And that's why I think we're headed in the wrong direction where we're headed in this country. We're going backwards.
Right.
Instead of recognizing the history, the rich history that's, oftentimes been thwarted or kicked to the side.
Right.
It's getting kicked to the side again.
Right. And people don't realize that they hear the word ignorant and they don't even understand the root of it. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you're untaught, right?
Exactly.
Because if you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what you're missing. So that's why they're like, well, what's with this being taken away or this taken away? Well, if you look at it, you're not getting anything. They want you to not know, right?
Bingo.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me.
Which my great hope is that maybe that will spark a backlash where people will actually start to educate themselves that may not have done so before.
Right.
The information's still out there. Okay, we still have access to it. We have access to Black history. We have to Latino history, to Asian history. We still have access to that information. We can educate ourselves on what really went down and how do we continue to educate ourselves and the people around us as well.
Right. And sharing that knowledge. And so when you start taking away books and taking away history, people always say, well, aren't you offended by, this book? I'm like, actually, I'm not offended by that book. What I'm offended by is that if you take it away, then it makes it say that didn't happen, right?
Exactly.
What you should say is, yeah, this book, it's not appropriate. They shouldn't be talking like this. But this is because in those times, people didn't know. There was a lot of ignorance going on.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly. I remember in high school to read To Kill a Mockingbird. I refused to say the N-word, but yeah. I think the N-word still needs to be in there to show how people were. Right. You don't want to water it down.
No.
Right?
No, that book is one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think, those are the kind of books we need to be reading still.
So that people understand and see how things can repeat themselves if we forget.
They will.
Yeah.
History is doomed to repeat itself for those who forget it.
Right. And it's a scary thing, And so how do we create that kind of change? How are we going to make the ripple effect? Because so many things are going away. What are we going to do?
Well, I really think that it starts with us every single day. Us to be mindful every single day with the people that we interact with, just kind of at that grassroots level. I try to really be mindful when I go into the community, when I'm dealing with, people of color, when I'm dealing with immigrants, to be respectful. At least this one person is being respectful towards me instead of so many people that, are being disrespected every day by everybody else, and being an example for that, mm-hmm. right? And then standing up where you can stand up, being part of organizations like this one right here, the Just Healing, for instance. This is beautiful. You guys are great, to be able to especially help men heal that have been, been abused, I think is really important because men, us guys, we don't talk. We keep it stuff down, right? So when people, have a forum like we're talking right now, this is right here, mm-hmm. is part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And I always say, see something, do something. I say that to people.
Bingo.
And I don't mean go get a sword and do all that, but maybe you see it and maybe you say, hey, I did see that. Or you go talk to a manager and say, hey, that wasn't okay. Like,
Bingo.
at least try to do something, but not just stand there, right?
Exactly.
And my kid always said they'll see things, they'll see little things, little subtle things. So I've taught them to look at those little micro interactions, right? And they're like, "Mom, why aren't you mad?" And I say, because maybe someone who looked like me didn't treat them very nicely because they're not looking at the whole picture. But let me show someone that kindness and show them how I can be culturally different, right? Because I don't know
Exactly.
what that person's walk was. So I'm not going to do this
Exactly.
to them. I'm not going to respond with not nice. I'm going to respond with love.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, human beings, all human beings that I've seen are controlling and self-centered on the one hand. We see things from our own perspective. I have no idea what it's like to be a black woman.
Mm-hmm.
I am not like no to be in your skin, right?
Right.
But we also want to belong together as human beings too. And so we need to focus on that belonging more and understanding more, rather than you know, putting our opinions out there first. You know, I'm the expert. I know this. I don't believe in that. I think that when you really try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and you're aware of attribution bias,
Right.
human judgmentalness, we
Right.
judge people in their circumstances.
Right.
Instead of understanding, like you just did that right there, I don't understand their circumstances. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you do that kind of thing, Deborah, you're trying to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people think they're fair, but they're really not.
No.
But when you stop yourself and you put yourself in that circumstance and say, you know, I don't know what that person's walk is, so let me not judge them. Instead, let me try to understand and reach them. And maybe in that moment, your generosity will humble them. I think it sometimes does. Like, wow, that's not the response I expected to get. That's what I get from so many people too. They don't expect this kind of response.
Right.
So, you know, it begins with us doing this kind of thing with people, whether you're talking in a store, you're talking with a patient, you're talking in a podcast, whatever it is, you try to be able to make that human connection. Try not to be judgmental with people. Try not to, you know, focus on power and control, but rather love and belonging.
Right.
I think when we can do that, you know, it's like the starfish story. Do you remember the starfish story? No?
No.
So I love this story. So this old man's walking on the beach and he sees this little kid, and this kid is running back and forth and he's throwing stuff into the water. And our old man gets closer and he says, son, what are you doing? And the son, he has a starfish in his hand and he throws it out to sea and he says, the tide's going out and all these starfish are going to die. And the old man says, son, there are thousands of starfish on the beach and miles of beach. He said, you don't think you could possibly make a difference? And that little kid, he thinks for a second and he reaches down, he picks up a starfish, he throws it into the water, and he says, it made a difference to that one. I love that story.
Yes. And
I
that
love the
hits it
starfish
right on
story.
the head.
Exactly.
It hits it on the head. It makes a difference to that one. And that's what I tell people when I'm working with people, immigration issues, who wants asylum. I'm like, why do you put so much work into that? Why do you want to tell their story so bad? Because
Exactly.
I'm making a difference for that one person.
Exactly.
This is like in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, that starfish.
That starfish.
Yeah.
I'm going to make those starfish shine.
And that's what helps keep me going, you know, when it can get you down, everything that's going on, so much. But I just focus on that one person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can make a difference with that one person, then that makes all the difference to me. That gives my life meaning, gives my work meaning then at that point.
Right. And if all of us would just do that instead of trying to control every pot, you can't. But you can control your pot and do the best you can. And if we all just did that, we'd have a little, you know?
And you did it with your kids, for instance, in that moment. You know, Mom, aren't you mad? Well, I don't know that person's story. Wow, that made a difference in your kid's head.
Right.
To be able to say, hey, that's the way that I want to be too.
Right.
And then they go on and they help somebody else. I mean, we can't do it all, and if it comes too big, we're gonna get frustrated and we're gonna give up. So just focus on that one person, that one starfish, you know?
Right.
It makes all the difference in the world.
And then they feel that love. I always call it, you know, I want people to see my Christ light, you know, but they feel that, you know, whatever people believe, you know, they feel that, and it has them see people differently for just that moment.
Right.
You know, I can give them
Right.
that moment of love, you know, and that's
Exactly.
an amazing thing.
Yeah. And with the immigrants I work with too, I try to get them to see their own beauty, their own meaning, their own courage, especially. That's one of the most important things, I think, is to access a person's courage, to be able to go, you know, you're going through a really tough time here, but you're standing tall, you know what? You're standing on your own 2 feet and you're trying to make this better. You know, that's a testament to your courage,
Right. Right.
right?
And are there any barriers to all this work that you do? Like,
Well, there are many barriers.
that is a big question. That's not fair. Yeah.
Yeah. There are many, many barriers, but and I can't talk about all those barriers, but it's a matter of sticking with it. It's a matter of
Yeah.
sticking and getting through those barriers and trying to
Right.
think outside the box sometimes,
Bingo.
coming up with interventions that may not be what we would talk about as typical psychological interventions, right? But rather, you know, helping a person, again, finding that part of themselves that's courageous and can continue forward, and instead of just caving underneath all the pressures that are happening.
Right. Right. And just giving that humanity. That was the thing is I just wanted to
Mhm.
give humanity. And if I could
Yeah,
do that, I had a good day. Like, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. Well, that's why you and I are such good friends,
Yeah,
because we
that's true.
believe the same thing.
Yeah, we could not talk for a few years and it's still the same. We start where we
Exactly,
left off and we always get a grin.
exactly,
Like, you know.
exactly. Very much so. I'm so grateful.
I am grateful. I've always been grateful to have you in my life and the way that you see the world is just absolutely amazing. And do you still have your chickens?
Not anymore.
Oh,
Not
that'd be
anymore.
valuable right now.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Exactly. Well, there was for a time when we had eggs running out of our ears, but no, we don't have them anymore at this
Oh
point,
my gosh.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a garden and you had chickens and we'd exchange. Yep,
Hmm.
yep, yep, yep.
Yep. And I had the fish too.
The
Remember
fit. Oh
the tilapia?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I put it in the
Raising it.
freezer. Oh, it's so good. Well, Dr. Deulen, tell me how do people get in touch with you, and what do you want to leave us with?
Well, I'd like to leave you with, first of all, just kind of wrapping up everything that we're all, like, in the words of Harry Stack Sullivan, we're all more human than otherwise, and we need to try to understand the humanity of each one of us. Um, there's a really good Latino practice that I'm helping to foster to build. The head of the guy's name is Luis Martinez, and his email is Luis M, I believe, at thecaveclinicalservices.com.
Okay.
And mine is Dr. Deulen at thecaveclinicalservices.com as well. Um, and it's a really good organization. It's really focused on Latinos and kind of being a voice in the community for Latino community as well. So, and the general email is thecaveclinicalservices.com
Perfect.
as
That
well.
is just so awesome in the work you do, and keep doing it, because I mean people need people like you out there, and especially people who really want to get with their culture and help them through it that
Yeah,
lens, you know?
yeah. And you too. I mean, this is beautiful what you're doing here. I'm really, really happy for you and proud of you.
That touches me because I think we met when I had first graduated and continued,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
people like you have like mentored and supported me through all of my trials and tribulations and let me be crazy, and you're like you'll be okay, you
You're
know.
wonderful.
So,
You're wonderful.
aw, thank
Great.
you. And thank you everybody for tuning in to just this episode of Just Healing. If you want to contact Dr. Deulen, we'll have his information below, and let's see you next time.